Hey guys, it's Mo, and today I want to share with you a simple tutorial on how to make some of these fabric masks with either elastics or with ties for your friends and for your family. I'm doing this because I know I was intimidated to start this until I saw the perfect video that made sense and it inspired me, so that's why I'm making this for you guys. I have been using some old pillowcases as well as cotton fabric that I had. So you're going to need a pillowcase, some scissors or a rotary cutter, your template, which I made out of a pizza box. It's 9.5 inches by 6.5 inches, and a ruler. You don't necessarily need the ruler, but it does help. And then you will want a cutting mat. So you're going to take the closed end of your pillowcase and fold it up to the hemmed end of the open side of your pillowcase. So you're not folding it all the way up to the end, you're folding it up to that first seam. And you want to make sure it's all flattened out or whatnot, and you want to position your pillowcase this way that I have it on the mat, and put your template where it's pushed all the way up to that hemmed end of the open end of the pillowcase. The first cut you're going to make is going to slice off the sort of middle area of the pillowcase, and you want to make sure you do that because that's going to give you some fabric to make ties from. Then you'll want to slice off the open end of the pillowcase. That's also going to allow you to have some fabric to make ties from. Then you'll want to just slice the other sides. It doesn't really matter. This cut that I'm making here right now, the extra fabric to the outside is going to be perfect. I think, I haven't tried, for maybe a kid's size mask. These fit, I would say, like a standard adult face. Zach has worn these masks that I've made and they fit him fine as well. So then you're going to discard that fabric. This is the two pieces I was showing you that may work for a kid size type of mask. Then you'll have these two as seams. You can throw that away and you're left with what you need to make your masks. You can set those aside, and we're going to take the sort of belly of the pillowcase that's still in a circle. It's like an open tube now, and I start to fold this up, but what you really need to do first is to slice off the seam edge. So I just take my ruler, make a straight line as best I can. Again, these things don't have to be like super perfect. Adequate is good enough. So discard that, and now we're going to fold this guy in half and make sure everything is even. Then we're going to fold him in half again just to get more surface area cut when we are making our trims. I am going to slice off a little bit to make this edge more square. Then you want to measure 2-inch width slices, I guess, of your pillowcase here. So I am using the grid on my mat plus the grid on my ruler, and that's helping me to measure 2-inch pieces of fabric. You're going to get, depending on how big your pillowcase is, you will get at least 2, maybe 3 sections from this. So this is what you're going to use to make your ties. Then we're going to take that open end of the pillowcase, the hemmed section where it's been folded over, and we're going to slice off the seam that's keeping it in a tube as well. Just make it even. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we're going to slice that off. Then we're going to fold this in half again, and working from that folded seam, you're going to cut 1 inch 1 square width of a piece of fabric. Because it's already folded in half, we don't have to fold this piece of fabric in half and then sew it, as I will show you here, and then another 2-inch piece of fabric. So all in all, you will have, what is that, about 5 lengths of these fabrics, which will give you 10 ties. You're going to make these ties, you're going to make 1 long piece of fabric, and then you're going to cut it in half, and that's going to give you 2 ties. So now I'm just showing you how many pieces of fabric you're going to get from your pillowcase. And now I was filming, or I was doing this and not filming, so I'm showing you that I started with the edge of the pillowcase that was already folded over and started folding the outsides in to themselves. You will see, I know that doesn't really make sense, I guess, what I'm saying, but you will see as we go on. I'm just folding the outer edges into the middle and then folding in half and ironing. This is what's going to give you your little ties. And there's no turning in with this method. You don't have to sew a tube and then turn it inside out. I will leave a link to where I found or what like pattern I used to make this. So that you can see, but I was like, I'm not turning these ties out. This is going to take forever to do. So if you don't have elastic, you can make ties. So let's go on to actually making a real tie here. So you're going to take your length of fabric, the 2-inch length of fabric, and you're going to fold it in half lengthwise. And you're going to iron it down to give you a guide of the middle that you're going to fold your outsides to. So we're just going to iron this all the way down here. And I do want to say that I don't think pillowcases are the right thread count or whatnot that you want to use. For this, you do want to use a thicker weave cotton. So I do a 3-ply mask because I want to make sure that I don't see any light coming through the fibers of the pillowcase that I'm using. So I end up doing a 3-ply mask here. And now you can see I'm folding this edge into the middle and then ironing it down, and we're going to continue to do that on both sides. But like I was saying, you want to make sure that you're using a thicker weave woven thread count fabric, which is why I think they're recommending cotton. I have some leftover Nutcracker cotton fabric that I have that I can still, I don't think it's a high enough thread count. I can still see the light through the fibers. So I have just been making my masks 3-ply instead of 2-ply. So that's some information there. I'm not making any claims on anything. I'm just showing you guys how to do this so you can make these for your friends and for your family. So repeat this on the other side. We are going to just keep ironing this down. And you want to do this for one mask. You want to do this 2 times. You want to have 2 long strips of fabric that you fold over to make these ties. And once we finish ironing this down the middle, we're going to fold it over again and iron it flat so that you can then go ahead and sew it. So we have finished that. I end up putting water in my iron eventually. I just don't have any in there right now. So now I'm folding it over again and making that seam, pressing everything together more crisp so that it can be run through my sewing machine. You can sew these by hand. I don't see why you couldn't, honestly. It would be rather easy, I think, to make these by hand, but I'm going to be using a sewing machine today. You could also, I've seen people use clean or suggest to use clean shoelaces or ribbon or cotton clothesline or something, anything that you can make a tie from. So now we're going to fold over the edge, fold the edge inward, and that's where we're going to sew to sort of close up the tie here. And that's going to be the end of the tie that we leave loose so that you can tie it around your head. And you want to fold in the ends of both sides of both ties. And iron that down. You can use a pin. I end up using a pin in one of them and then not a pin in any of the others because it was easier to just let it be with the pressing of the seams. So we've got that, and we're putting our iron away. I guess I didn't cut this. Now we're going to go ahead and sew the edges. Honestly, I did this and then realized that you don't need to sort of sew down and then across. You can just catch the fold when you're sewing straight down the line of the tie, because it might get caught in your machine. You might find that your machine eats it up or your needle goes too fast or something. So you don't necessarily need to do this part. I did it because this is the first time I was making this one with ties. So make sure that you put your presser foot down and that you backstitch so that your stitching is locked in place on your little tie. And I just used the width from the needle to the edge of the presser foot as my seam allowance. I didn't measure, I didn't account for certain things. I just said, you know what, and pretty much every seam allowance I do just uses the width of the presser foot. And you can see you are just sending this guy straight through the sewing machine, and you're gonna, again, repeat it twice. You're gonna make sure you have two of the long 2-inch pieces of fabric sewn like that. And then here you can see that I didn't do it back and forth on the edge. I just sewed straight through. So now that we have our 2 ties done, you're going to choose your 3 pieces of fabric. I recommend doing 1 for the front, 1 for the back, and 1 for the middle. So the front and the back should be facing each other, and then the middle one is going to be on the other side, because you're going to be pinning between 2 layers of the fabric, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So you're going to fold your ties in half and snip them at the middle. Then you're going to take that open end and pin that to the corner of one of the masks, making sure that your ties are staying within the mask when you go to sew it. So I know I'm cut off here. I wish I wasn't, but I'm hoping you can get the gist that you're just pinning the ties into the corners of the mask, and you're going to then sew around it. Here I show you how to use or make this with elastic. The first ones that I did, I had some thicker elastic like this, and I cut it in half down the center so they were thinner pieces, and I just kind of pulled them so any of the elastic that I may have not cut straight or whatnot kind of came out, and they don't end up fraying. The elastic that I used was white, and this was some random black elastic that I found. This one did not work so well. So I do recommend testing the elastic you have. If it's too thick, cut a little bit and stretch it and see if it kind of deforms or frays. This one did. The other white elastic that I had to trim in half like this ended up fine. If you do use elastic, you want to make sure you're using 7 inches in the length of the elastic. And again, just pin it to the corner between the first and second layer of your mask. And then you can go ahead and get the rest of that elastic out of the way, pin your side seam down, and then bring that elastic, making sure you're keeping it flat, bring that elastic down to the bottom corner and pin it that way. If you do these steps first, pin the top one, then pin your side seam, you're going to be able to keep the elastic out of the way of your presser foot, your sewing needle, etc. That's going to be a good way to keep it out of there. So I'm continuing with my ties. I'm going to take the open raw end of the tie, place it between the first and second layer of the mask fabric here, and then pin it together. And then we will do the bottom one, and then I will pin it all around the sides and start to sew. So I am trimming the strings, the thread, as I go, because after I made like a bazillion of these, I was like, I don't want to sit here and trim these threads, so it's easier to do it as you go. So now that we have the 4 corners pinned, I'm going to stuff the ties into the middle and then start to pin around my mask. You want to make sure that the ties are not going to be in the way of your presser foot or sewing needle at all. So I have found that it's easier to pin up 3 sides and then kind of shake the ties into the center, and that you'll see me do that here in a second. And then that allows you with more ease to pin up the 4th side. So just pinning. I love to use these pins that have the colorful heads to them, because I'm afraid I'm going to drop a pin. I'm never going to find it. It's going to end up in my foot or somebody else's foot or Marcus's mouth. So I always use colorful head pins. And there I did. I just shook it like a bag of chips and put those ties back in the middle there to make sure that they didn't get sewn up accidentally into my seam for my mask. And once you have that done, you're going to bring it over to your sewing machine. We're going to start sewing, I don't know, 3/4 of the way down on one side. You want to leave an opening for turning your mask. So make sure again that you backstitch and then stitch all around. I try and be super careful to make sure I'm not catching the ties in the seam at all. And then I use my hand to turn, I don't know, sewing machine technology or terminology, as I'm realizing as I'm saying this. I use my hand to turn the knob on the side to put the needle down in the place that I want it, so I'm not like zooming off the edge of my mask. And once you get to the corners, you want to make sure your needle is in the fabric when you lift the presser foot and turn your fabric to begin your next seam. Again, seam allowance is just the width from the needle to the edge of the presser foot. I don't know, I think it's maybe 1/4 inch. I was not doing any sort of measuring. So we just do this around all 4 sides. Once we get back to the side we started on, we're going to leave a little opening, making sure to back stitch so that we don't have any stitches coming out. But just keep sewing around. And like I said, I do these in 3-ply. You can do them in, I don't know, I did some in 4-ply, but I would suggest 3-ply is probably more comfortable to breathe through, I think. And you can do this with whatever kind of fabric. Like if you have fabric that you want to sandwich in the middle, like some of mine have nutcracker fabric in the middle, because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have enough to make stuff. And I had this old nutcracker fabric from, I don't even know what project I was trying to work on. And I start to turn this inside out here. And I forget to tell you that you need to trim your corners so that it's easier to press and easier to sew around. So I turn it back inside out and go around the corners, and making sure you're not snipping the seam that you made. You're not snipping your stitches. You're just making the corners flat. So now we can turn it back out, or inside out, right side out. We can turn it right side out, and you can see we have our basic form of our mask. We want to take it back over to our ironing board. I don't have an ironing board. I use this like fleecy blanket thing as an ironing board. And you want to make sure that you're pressing the edges around as well. If you want the back or the front, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to fold it in half and iron it to make a seam, I guess. You're just trying to make a denotation of where the middle is. So then you fold the bottom and the top up and iron those to make a marcation of where those folds should be. Then we're going to flip it over and kind of accordion fold this guy up. Sometimes this can be kind of hard to do, but you just want to keep practicing, whatnot. And then you're going to press him down. My cord keeps getting in the way. Again, you can use pins in this, but if you've been making these for a while, eventually you don't really need to. So I didn't, but you can use pins in it to hold its shape better. So I start in the middle, back stitch a little bit, and then go to the edge. I make sure my needle is inserted into my fabric, lift the presser foot, fold up my accordion style thing here, drop my presser foot, and then just sew a seam down the accordion fold. Then again, make sure I get to the corner with my needle in the fabric, lift the presser foot, turn the fabric, sew another stitch down the side. Once I get to the corner, I repeat it. Make sure that your needle is in your fabric before you lift your presser foot, fold up your accordion, and then sew it the other way back down. I think that pins can sometimes get in the way because of how thick the accordion folds are. And then you just put it together like that. And that is how you have a mask. I trim up the little threads, and now you have a mask to wear. What you do want to make sure is that you place the mask with the accordion folds facing down when you're wearing it. That's what I've been told. That's what I've seen. So I just wanted to pass that tip along to you all. Share this video with anybody that you know that can sew, and hopefully they will be able to feel inspired to make masks as well. So I will talk to you on my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.